Gosh. No. Oh my gosh, no. No, that was disgusting. I didn't like that one. Hey guys, I'm Adriana, and today I'm gonna be talking to you guys about something that I can almost guarantee you all know and love. Fail videos. Can we just be real for a hot minute? We all love watching other people's fail videos, right? I mean, they're hilarious. Even the ones that make you cringe and like hurt all over, those are some of the best videos on the internet. It's like you start watching one and then all of a sudden 4.5 hours pass and you've watched a million more and somehow they're still hilarious. It doesn't matter how many you've seen, right? Like when a guy is trying to do a really cool trick on his bike, you know, and then he crashes into a parked car, hilarious. Or like when a girl is trying to do a really cool swan dive off of the diving board and instead she just like trips and then belly flops instead. Classic. What's way less hilarious, however, is when we're the ones doing the failing. Suddenly we're not laughing anymore. Now, I know everyone has a story about when they fell in front of a bunch of people at school, but I fell all the time. Like all the time, on stages, in cafeteria, downstairs, on completely flat sidewalks where there was nothing impeding me walking. I'm serious, all the time, all the time. I fell down the stairs on the first day of school before the first bell had even rung, and thankfully it was an empty stairwell so nobody saw it, but that actually wasn't usually the case. So coincidentally, I fell down that same stairwell again later that year, but that time it wasn't empty. It was actually in the middle of a class change, and everyone was going up and down the stairs in like this parade of bodies. And I was wearing these really cool platform combat boots that I thought made me look so rock and roll, but mostly they didn't. And I knew when my ankle twisted, it was not gonna end well. So I fell. You probably could guess where the story was going, but I actually rolled forward and landed on my knees. It was actually one of my more graceful landings as far as falls go. But do you remember that scene in The Lion King where Mufasa saves Simba, but then he gets trampled by all the wildebeest in the process? Yeah, it was a lot like that. Actually, no one stopped moving. I was Mufasa, guys. And instead of someone graciously helping me up, or at least stopping so I could hobble back to my feet and shuffle away in humiliation, the crowds kept moving. And I surfed on my knees the entire way down the stairs. That's not a metaphor, guys. I'm not making this up. I was literally pushed down the stairs on my knees by the crowd until I reached the very bottom. It was awful. Even if epic fails like mine are embarrassing or painful in the moment, it's usually pretty easy for us to look back on them and laugh, right? Or cry. But mostly laugh. Unfortunately, we sometimes fail in much more serious ways. And rather than look back at those failures and laugh them off, we look back and wonder if anyone, including God, will still be able to love us. We all fail. We all mess up. It's part of being an imperfect human in an imperfect world, and that's just the truth. But even though we know that's true, sometimes our failures can leave us feeling like failures. And then there are the failures where we feel like we've let other people down. When you shot on the wrong basket, or when there's a group project and you forgot to do your work. I mean, have you ever felt like you just disappointed your team or your coach, or you let down your family and friends? On some level, I'm sure we can all relate to the feeling of disappointing others. And sometimes it even feels like we've let God down too. When we make bad choices, it's easy to feel like there's this division between God and us. And I don't know about you guys, but I hate that feeling. I hate it. And even if you're not sure what you think about God, the idea that God might not love you if you fail may have crossed your mind once or twice. And it doesn't sound that great, does it? Maybe there are some choices that you just keep making over and over again. You keep dating that girl, you keep showing up to that party, you keep going after that guy, you stay friends with that person who isn't the best influence, you keep gossiping about your friends, you keep looking at those inappropriate pictures on your phone, and even though you know they're the wrong choice, you just keep making them. And that leaves you feeling like a failure. No matter what the failure may be, I think this is true for all of us. We just end up regretting it later, don't we? We wish we could just take it all back. And we hope that no one ever finds out, because if they do, it's gonna change the way they see us. And it's in those moments that guilt just starts to creep in. Guilt makes us feel unlovable. It makes us believe that what we've done or the ways that we've failed mean that no one, not God, not other people, could ever accept us. It creates this distance between God and us, and it feels like there's nothing we can do to fix it. And sometimes that distance feels so huge that we're tempted to just give up and accept the fact that we are just one big failure in God's eyes. Because how could God possibly love a failure? Today, we're gonna look at a pretty epic fail from the Bible. Now, it happened in this guy named Peter's life. Peter was one of Jesus' disciples. He was part of Jesus' inner circle when he was on the earth. But as we're about to see, even guys like Peter were capable of some pretty epic fails. But before I tell you what that fail was, we're actually going to fast forward a little bit. What that was actually a fast forward. Last week, we talked about Jesus' death on the cross. After Jesus was crucified, Peter and the other disciples were suddenly unsure what to do. I mean, for all they knew, their leader was dead. So they had to make a choice, right? What do we do next?
Well, what do you want to do? I don't know, bro. What do you want to do? Well, I don't know. I asked you first. What do you want to do? I don't even know, guy. I don't know. What do you?
Now, most of the disciples, they just went back to the work they'd been doing before they met Jesus. And for a lot of them, including Peter, that just meant fishing. So on this particular day, Peter and some of the other disciples were out fishing on a boat. All of a sudden, this guy from shore just starts yelling at them and he tells them, try throwing the nets on the other side of the boat to catch more fish. Sounds a little crazy, but they did it. And they caught so many fish, they couldn't even pull the nets back into the boat. At this point, this seems like a story about a random guy who just happens to know a whole lot about fishing, right? Wrong. That's probably what the disciples thought too, until they realized the guy on shore was Jesus. Yes, the leader they loved and thought was gone for good was now back. He was teaching them and guiding them again, and this time he even took care of breakfast. Now, I don't know about you, but I would have probably been just a little bit freaked out. I mean, we just saw this guy buried, right? And in spite of what they could see with their eyes, they just knew it was him. And the disciples headed immediately to the shore to reunite with the friend and leader that they loved. And this is where we pick up our story. Now come and have some breakfast, Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he'd been raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Now, we're gonna pause right there. Just to clarify, it can be kind of confusing. Peter's birth name was Simon, but Jesus gave him the name Peter. So we see in the Bible that Jesus goes back and forth calling Peter by both names, and that's why you're gonna hear both verses when we're reading it today. So back into our story. So in order to understand why Jesus asked Peter this question, do you love me? We have to go all the way back to Peter's epic fail. You see, when Jesus was on trial before his death, Peter was asked if he knew and believed who Jesus said he was. Seems like a silly question, right? I mean, of course he knew who Jesus was. Of course Peter believed. But instead of telling the truth, Peter answered a different way. Fearing the crowds would turn on him as well, he denied that he knew Jesus 3 different times. I mean, you can probably imagine how guilty Peter felt after that. There's no doubt that Peter felt like he had failed Jesus in a pretty big way. And now we fast forward to this moment on the beach where Peter sees Jesus again. And Jesus asked Peter this simple yet massive question, do you love me? So let's just jump back in and see how Peter responded. Yes, Lord, Peter replied, you know I love you. Then feed my lambs, Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. A third time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time, and he said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. This was an amazing moment, you guys. Remember that we said that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. 3 times Peter was asked if he knew Jesus, and all 3 times Peter denied him. So here, Jesus was giving Peter the chance to make that failure right. He did it by asking Peter a question 3 times in a row. Jesus was essentially giving Peter a do-over. And he didn't just stop there. Each and every time Peter affirmed his love for Jesus, Jesus gave him the same command. now take care of my sheep. Now, Jesus wasn't asking Peter to put down his fishing pole and become an actual shepherd. No, Jesus was asking Peter to take care of the Jesus followers left on earth, the other Christians. He was inviting Peter back into the story. And not just that, he was giving him a really big role to play. Right after this, Jesus told Peter that he wanted Peter to be the leader of starting the Christian church. Now, if I were Peter, I would have been expecting Jesus to kick me out of the squad and revoke my disciple license. In fact, that was kind of the likely outcome before the miracle of what Jesus did that first Easter. Before Jesus' death and resurrection, failures were pretty final, but this was after. And because of what Jesus did at Easter, Peter's story wasn't done. His failures didn't disqualify him from God's love, and ours doesn't either. Your failures don't take away from Jesus' love. Your story is never completely done. You are never counted out. Your failures don't have to be final. Because of Jesus, there is always an opportunity for forgiveness and grace, just like Peter experienced that morning on the beach. Peter may have counted himself out, and maybe you've counted yourself out too. But Jesus' love never, ever counts us out. His love can cover over even our biggest failures and give us a fresh start, because your failures don't take away Jesus' love. Listen, we all fail a lot. I know I do. I absolutely know I do. And you and I, we're gonna keep on failing for the rest of our lives. But the next time you start to believe that your mistakes make you a failure, or that you've gone too far for God's love, I want you to remember Peter. Jesus didn't move away from Peter when he failed. Instead, Jesus moved toward him. And the cool thing is that Jesus will do the same for us. In fact, we can move toward Jesus too. We can take a step toward him when we feel distant. We can invite him into the middle of our failures because we know that he still loves us in spite of those failures. So, what does that mean for us? This week, try taking one step towards Jesus. Instead of giving up when you make a mistake, make a choice to move towards Jesus. Maybe it's through praying and sharing some of those feelings of failure with him. Maybe it's asking him to forgive you for those choices that you regret. Or maybe it's setting time aside to go on a walk, read your Bible, listen to some worship music. Maybe it's finding a way to spend time with him so you can just talk to him. Or maybe it's simply committing to coming back here next week and just keep trying to figure out what all this God stuff is about. Whatever it looks like for you, I want to encourage you to think about taking a step towards Jesus this week. Every time you feel like a failure, rather than giving up, take a step towards Jesus and his love for you. The more you do, the more you'll see that there is no failure that can ever take away his love for you. As you guys head out today, I want you to think about this question. What's one way a failure in my life has kept me from God?